Welcome to the DRF Sports Podcast, brought to you by DRF Sports. America's most trusted name in horse racing is now providing sports bettors with exclusive data, analytics, previews, videos, and expert picks on all major sports. Bet smarter and have more fun doing it. It's the DRF Sports Podcast, and now your host, Sheldon Alexander. Ready, set, bet.
This is the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 10. Make sure you like and follow wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander. A reminder, we do this twice a week. On Tuesdays, we recap the week that was, and on Fridays, it's the Picks Pod. Now, I'm coming off a big win on Thursday Night Football as the Rams rolled over the Seahawks, as well as two other wins in NCAA action last night. But the NFL, Week 5 continues with a full slate of games as we try to arm you with all the information you need to win your bets this weekend. So make sure you check out drf.com/sports because that's where you can get all of the details and insights, including power trends, line movements, team stats, and even more betting angles, including Scott Grambling's weekly six-pack in both the NFL and NCAA. So make sure you check that out. Again, drf.com/sports. That's where you need to be every single day for all of our game previews. Plus, of course, we go in depth on this podcast. However you want your betting information, we've got you covered. On this episode of the DRF Sports Podcast, Matt Russell joins us as we try to top last week's performance in which we gave out 3 outright underdog winners in the NFL, plus another winning record with our college football picks. 3 more wins for you last night in the NCAA and NFL, and all we're trying to do here is just stay hot. You hear that, Iowa? I know it's a massive weekend with the Hawkeyes as slim favorites at home to Penn State, so let us know who you got. Take a listen to our brand new episode of the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 10, to find out who we got. At drf.com/sports twice a week, we've got you covered for everything you need to know to arm you and help you pick some winners. And luckily for you, it starts right about now. He's back again on the Friday Picks Pod, and after a wild Thursday night football matchup between the Rams and Seahawks, including a Geno Smith sighting, how are you feeling, my dude? How you doing?
I'm reeling. Just a game on drugs at that point, right? Matthew Stafford gets hurt, and you're like, uh-oh, Rams are in trouble here. And like, how often do you see both quarterbacks get hurt? Same kind of injury, right? Hand type injury. And it's like, no, sorry. Russell Wilson is going to be the guy who's hurt to the point where he has to come out of the game. And yeah, that's Geno Smith's music. And then he's not awful, right? Like he zips him down the field. He makes a great throw to DK Metcalf for the second touchdown. And you're just like, oh my God, is this going to happen? And so, I'm watching that game, and, we'll get to the NCAA stuff in a little bit as well, but I'm also watching those two games, and we end up cashing both of those tickets that we had from Tuesday's show. And so I'm feeling really good about things. And I gave out the under over at the score on a piece that I wrote earlier this week. And it's like, everything's going really well. And this game, right? This game is going to, I always say the first half, it, often decides whether a team covers or not. And the second half is winning time, right? That decides the money line. So first half point spread, second half money line. And, I don't know about you, but you've seen Russell Wilson's work. I kind of felt like if he was in that mix, right, he was going to do Russell Wilson type things, and that game was going to be close. And you and I talk about bets that, sometimes really good bets lose. The teaser leg, the Seattle Seahawks plus 8.5, a phenomenal bet, right? What percentage of the time do you think that cashes? 95% of the time. And so the fact that we're paying minus 270 for a teaser leg there, that, we need to cash 75% of the time to be profitable. Somehow it doesn't. And it comes down to 2 seconds. And it's not the most dramatic, right? It's not going to be on, Scott Van Pelt's bad beats or anything like that, right? Or maybe it would be. I mean, honestly, it was that sort of rough. But, it isn't just the matter of Geno Smith throwing that interception. And it's like, oh, if you did it one play later, man, his knees Rams take knees and the game is over. It's like, also, if you had thrown that interception anywhere else on the field, right? Because the guy grabs the ball and he runs immediately out of bounds. So any amount of like, just kind of like running around with it, or like they do the thing where they go like, they first sort of start running and then somebody says like, no, go down because we don't want you to fumble it back. Like any type of movements basically would have killed 2 more seconds off the clock. But because that interception happens, bang, bang, right? Like catch out of bounds. It's like, no, boom. An incredibly good teaser leg that, again, I would make that bet 100 times out of 100 doesn't end up cashing. And, then they go to the replay and Lockett gets wiped out. And you're like, how is nobody on that? Like, that's illegal contact. But you're like, you just shrug your shoulders because it's officiating in football. And so, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like it leaves this stench, right? It leaves this bad taste in your mouth on an otherwise really profitable night. So a lot of mixed emotions. We got double punts coming. Geno Smith is involved. Who knows, man? You never know what to expect on a Thursday night.
Yeah, how many more close-ups did we need to see of Russell Wilson's mangled finger? Sure. I think like after the 80th one, it was like, okay, we get it. He can't play. But this is what it is. You're riding the wave week to week through every game, and the primetime games continue to live up to the hype. And at least they're entertaining, right? There's stuff going on. There's stuff happening. Right. But here's what we do each and every week. We try and get through as many picks as possible in both the NFL and NCAA. I try and give out the lines, tell you which way I'm leaning with the public narratives and all that fun stuff. And then Matt comes in with some information and education, as I like to say, on where the line is, where it was, and where it could be going before kickoff. As mentioned, I cashed in a nice winner on Thursday night thanks to the Rams and your boy Geno Smith. Matt was hitting with both NCAA picks last night. So let's try and keep the good times rolling here. We start off with the game that's in London. Remember to set your clocks, people. We got the 1-3 Jets at the 1-3 Falcons in London. Falcons 2.5-point favorites. Now, these London games are tough, as you never really know which team will react to the travel schedule better. If we go back to last week's action, the Falcons put up some points, but they have no idea how to win games. They can't close, right? No. The Jets finally look like a functioning NFL team in their first win of the season. But for me, the Falcons laying 2.5 points is never a place I want to be honest. Right. You could play this game anywhere, and the Falcons laying points, I never want to be on that side. That's just where I'm at. So give me the Jets and the points. But where are you laying here, man?
Yeah, you have absolutely retired from backing the Falcons as a favorite at any point. This is an easy one. Like, this is a really easy bet to make that I think, we talk about, hey, don't just show up on Sunday. Don't just show up on Friday, Thursday, whatever, looking to make your bet. Because if you even just looked at the lines on Sunday night, Monday, I believe you had Tuesday as well, maybe even a little bit of Wednesday, you would have seen that your Falcons here were 3.5-point favorites, right? And obviously, like, that has to jump out at you. Like, what are we even doing this for if that doesn't jump out at you, right? Like, have you people learned nothing? I obviously tongue in cheek there, but like, yeah, if you look at that game and you go, okay, neutral field, I get it's the Jets, but it's also the Falcons. Like, I was ready to lay 3.5 points or take 3.5 points with the Jets when for like the half second I thought this game was in Atlanta, right? Like when it was a road game for the Jets, I was like, sure, you're going to give me the hook because it's in Atlanta, as if that matters. And then I'm like, boom, I'm like, clue in. I'm like, oh, this is a neutral site game in London and you're still going to give me the 3.5 points? Like, yes, of course. Right. So immediately the market, and I shouldn't say that, it's not even immediate because it took a couple of days, but eventually the market all just sort of sits around, looks at each other and goes like, why are we taking the Jets here? And like, then everybody took the Jets. And so that number goes down to 3. And now the problem is, or the issue is, if you're not on top of these things relatively early, and listen, there's not going to be a ton of bets that you absolutely have to make on Monday. But if you're not, you allow other things to happen over the course of the week that will affect the point spread. And in this case, negatively, if you're looking to back the Jets, right? Give it a few days, all of a sudden Calvin Ridley is out for this game. And all of a sudden, somehow it matters that Russell Gage is also out of this game. But again, cluster injuries to the wide receivers. And so if you were sitting there and maybe you saw it go to 3 and you're like, I missed out on the 3, maybe it goes back to 3.5. That's where the market reading has to come in. Like, you have to know, regardless of who's may or may not play, it's not going back to 3.5. You're not getting that hook back. And by the way, if you do get the hook back in any sort of circumstance like that, it's probably not a great sign for your underdog if they move back off of 3 and go to 3.5. So you might not want that bet anyway. And of course, the Ridley thing comes down, and does he affect the point spread that much? Obviously, it moved off of a 0.5 point, and that's a pretty big move off of 3. But I think it was good to head there anyway, because like you said, what business do the Falcons have being like favorites of any sort of consequence over anybody? Right.
Yeah.
And so, this is definitely sort of a snooze you lose situation here. But I'd like to think, our listeners are, pretty sharp people out there. You'd notice, right? You would see right away that like 3.5 is just way too high for the Falcons. And you would make that bet. It was literally the only bet that I made early on in the week. And I'm thankful, obviously, that I did. Now, does that mean it's going to win for sure? Of course not, right? But we're talking about making positive expected value plus EV, good, strong bets. And Jets plus 3.5 was that. And I'd like to think that we all sort of recognize that right away.
Yeah. And I know I missed out on that. I'm going to be here on the Jets plus 2.5. And hey, that extra 0.5 point, 2 point, you snooze, you lose. You're right. But still, at no point do I want to be on the Falcons laying points anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
very true.
Money line's an option though, right? Like again, if it's a coin flip game, right? If it's a literal, like, I don't know who's going to win this game, like both these teams are dreadful, just take the money line, right? And whether that was plus 150 early in the week or whether it's plus 130 now, the only thing that you're missing out on is that extra 20 cents, right? It's not going to change whether or not you win or lose the bet. Right. Like if they win, they win, and if they lose, they lose. Right. So, the 2.5 is tough because, what if this thing goes to overtime? These, London games somehow end up in overtime pretty frequently. And, what if it goes to overtime and they kick that field goal, right? Like, you're going to be kicking yourself. You will feel better about losing a money line bet in that circumstance than you would by, missing out on market entry, as they say.
I'm interested what the market entry is on this next game here. As we move on, it's the 1-3 Patriots is 9-point favorites at the 1-3 Texans. This is a massive, massive line. And it's weird to me for the Pats, who haven't looked prolific at all on offense. And now we're asking them to be 9-point favorites against anyone on the road. I can't do it. I'm on the Texans because that just seems way too out of whack. And I know we talked about it on Tuesday. Has your mind kind of shifted a little as we head closer to the game?
No, because again, like, it's sort of fundamental premise, right? Like, you can get all sort of wrapped up in like, okay, like which team is, doing this or doing that and handicapping games. And like, I do that certainly, right? Like, that is my job. But then you just go, okay, like there's a fundamental premise here that we talked about on Tuesday, right? Big home underdog now goes on the road as a big road favorite. Like, it isn't, congruent. Now, you break it all down and you go, okay, well, obviously, because the Texans are atrocious and Tampa Bay is really good. And like, that's why, there's a wide sort of gap between the two. But when it comes down to like this game, you're right. Like, how many points are the Patriots going to score? Right? Like, it's not going to be a ton necessarily. We saw the Panthers 2 weeks ago as 9-point favorites, and they have far more of an offense. That was at a time when Christian McCaffrey was healthy because he got injured in that game. So before that game, right, that was an 8.5, 9-point spread. Well, I trust Carolina to score a lot more than I do the New England Patriots. And so again, fundamentally here, you have to take the underdog here in a circumstance after a team goes from home underdog to road favorite. Like, it's obviously not going to happen next week. The Texans aren't going to all of a sudden become, road favorites here. So from a market standpoint, you go, okay, everybody's had a full week at this so far. And if people and the big money, if you will, was dying to back the Patriots in this role, the number would have gone up to 10. Right? We talked about the idea of like, well, let's wait and see if it gets to 10. And listen, by Sunday, when recreational money starts building up, depending on your sports book, maybe this does get to 10. So I'm not looking to run out right now and make the bet, but it's one of those situations where it's either going to get to 10 and become a valuable bet from a just pure number standpoint, or it's going to stay at 9, 8.5 in that sort of no man's land range, which is going to tell you that enough sharp money, if you will, came in to prevent it from getting to 10. Right? Because we know the public, if you will, is going to be on the Patriots. That's just how this works, right? And it's not even necessarily about being on the Patriots. It's about being against the Texans, who put in their absolutely worst version of themselves last week, right? Like it was the opposite of doing work. And so we talk, you and I talk about the concept of range, right? Like we make our ratings and we go, okay, is this team going to play to the top of their range or the bottom of their range? Well, the Texans played to the bottom of their range, and that's outdoors, like rainy situation against, very good Buffalo Bills team. Like it was always going to be bad there. It just was sort of how bad. The answer is very bad. And now they go home, right? Their coach has called them out for not being ready to play and all of that sort of thing. So like, we're going to get the best version of the Texans. Unfortunately, that's the Davis Mills best version of the Texans, which is still only like a 25, right? Mm-hmm. Like a 27 at most out of 100 from a rating standpoint. But even then, right? Like I can't get to Patriots by 9, even against a 25, 27 type rated team in the Texans here. So yes, this is a hold your nose situation, but wait, see if the 10 comes up. If the line comes down, then you definitely know you're on the right track here. Yeah. So this is going to be a Texans bet no matter what. It's just a matter of sort of timing when to enter the market, as you said.
I got you. Moving on, though, we got the 3-1 Browns at the 3-1 Chargers. Chargers 2-point favorites at home. This is a big boy matchup to me. And one of those things, it kind of seems weird because if you swap the jerseys and the team names, right? Like this would be, everyone would be so hyped up about it. But because it's the Browns and Chargers in terms of those franchises, it seems kind of strange. But here's my thing here. Can Baker keep up on offense? I think Baker struggled a lot. I feel Herbert's cooking, and if it's only 2 points, less than a field goal, I'm okay with laying the 2 points with the Chargers at home. How do you feel about this game?
Yeah, a couple of things here, right? It's one of my favorite movies of all time, Pulp Fiction, right? Mm-hmm. Look at the big brain on Brett. This isn't a big boy matchup. This is a big brain matchup, man. We got Kevin Stefanski and Brandon Staley, like these two guys, right? Coach of the year last year. And frankly, Brandon Staley's going to win Coach of the Year this year. Right. And we saw that start this week. And maybe it took a matchup against John Gruden for everybody to be like, oh, okay, like this is a pretty drastic, right? And I'm looking at the market, and like John Gruden's still like in the top 6 or 7 in the Coach of the Year market. I'm like, whoa, timeout, like a full-on Sheldon Alexander timeout situation. Make it make sense type situation. But the point is that Brandon Staley's still available at plus 700. Now that's a favorite. And in a large market, but we've seen the work here, and we saw the narrative start to come out, right? We've seen clips of his post-game press conference. So whether it was some really sharp, coaching decisions on Monday Night Football, or the sort of viral clip of him talking about the sort of melding of analytics and just sort of aggression in football, people are starting to see it, right? And so whether they win the division, right now they're plus 200 and change to win the division. Whether they win that division or they, succumb to the Chiefs at some point, like at this point, like the train is on the tracks here for Brandon Staley to win Coach of the Year. And he was one of the preseason favorites at 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, something like that. And so you're not getting the preseason price necessarily, but you're getting a guy who I think honestly in a couple of weeks might be the odds on or close to it, odds on favorite to win that award. So hop in on that now. That being said, I think I'm going the other way on you here with the Chargers. And here's the problem. And the fundamental issue for me is that, like, and we talked about it like 5 to 45 minutes before the game on Monday night, depending on, when the game actually started. I thought to myself, like, oh my God, I'm going against Brandon Staley and Justin Herbert with Derek Carr and John Gruden. Like, what a horrendous decision this is. Like, I was sort of like paralyzed on like, what do I do? What do I do now? And so to say like the very next week, I'm going again to go against those guys does feel a little foolish. That being said, first and foremost, +2, we're talking about things that you should do automatically. Let's get that up to 8, right? Perfect teaser leg, and was a perfect teaser leg with the Seahawks. Again, not that I'm dwelling on it, but again, a perfect teaser leg that now I have to sort of go back to the drawing board and start to find other legs to pair that with this weekend. Really tough spot for the Chargers, though, right? Like, knock off the Chiefs, riding high. We dared them to show out in the following week. And the thing that I probably should have given more credit to is the fact that they played a Monday night football game, right? It's hard to kind of phone in a Monday night football game unless you're John Gruden's Raiders. And so it's like, okay, a real high on that Chiefs win, a real high on a division win at home on Monday Night Football. And now you got a Browns team coming to town. Like, this is a really good football team. Right. And we know this, and you're right about the branding, right? Eventually we'll get to a point where Chargers and Browns is like, this is an awesome game. We're just unfortunately not there yet with the public, but you and I know these are two really, really good teams. And so the Chargers are going to get hit in the mouth by the Browns, right? They're going to hand it to Chubb and Hunt, and they're going to, absolutely hit you in the mouth with it. And so now that we've seen the Browns go on the road, it's not the easiest spot for them, back-to-back road games necessarily either. But now that we've seen them go on the road to Minnesota and be able to shut down an offense that was cooking along pretty well there, right? Yeah. Kirk Cousins was getting things done with those weapons on the outside, and they couldn't move the ball. I mean, they could move the ball a little bit, but they certainly could not actually score points against the Browns. And so, I know it's 2 points, so it's not like we're getting a ton of points necessarily here, but it's certainly a lean for me on the Browns here at +2. We are watching it slowly tick up. So there's a possibility, like we did last night, where that Seahawks line hit 3. Now, again, different universe. Russell Wilson doesn't get hurt. Like, maybe, again, whether or not they win or lose, maybe that game still gets tighter within that 3-point spread, right? That was certainly a viable looking result throughout much of that game while he was healthy. I think it's a pretty similar situation, right? You wait and you see if you can get 3 points with the Browns. It's just a really tough spot for the Chargers to get up. But I believe in that coach, man. Okay. I believe in that coach to, and whether it's getting them up from a motivational standpoint or tactically to do the right things. Unfortunately, he's up against the guy who won the award last year and tactically is as, potentially as sharp as he is. So my best bet for this whole game is just grab that Brandon Staley Coach of the Year right now, because let's say they do win. Let's say you're right and they win this game, right? And now they've got, the Chiefs under their belt and the Browns under their belt. That's pretty good for the resume for Coach of the Year. So I would grab that as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, super interesting matchup. And that's the beauty of what we do here. Hey, sometimes you're on one side, sometimes I'm on the other. We leave it to you, the viewer, to make your decision there. We just try to arm you with as much information. And even the thing that I love the most, Matt giving you some different angles on ways that you can still make some bets, make some money on this game. It's the beauty of what we do here. I love it. The 2-2 Bears at the 3-1 Raiders. Raiders are 5.5-point favorites. Now, the Bears offense and Justin Fields showed some signs of life last week, but even without that, I'm having trouble taking the Raiders to beat anyone by 5.5 points. It's too many points for me, too rich for my blood. I'm on the Bears here. Give me those points at 5.5. What do you think?
Yeah, you're grabbing your chips off the roulette table before seeing another spin when it comes to the Raiders, because they were exposed a little bit there on Monday, right? And the thing we always talk about Derek Carr and the Raiders is the offense is going to work when you blitz him, because when a coach and a quarterback who are relatively sharp when it comes to offensive game planning and that sort of thing have worked together for so long at this point that these two have, right? The best case for them is facing a blitz, because Derek Carr can recognize it because he's smart enough to do that and find who, the one-on-one, right? The open receiver, like we've seen that so far this season. Chargers don't blitz, right? We talk about that when it comes to, again, anytime they play the Chiefs, right? They do the sit back, keep everything in front of them, like make you be patient. And unfortunately for the Raiders, that patience meant let's just hand the ball off to our injured running back here over and over and over again. Of course, that did not work, right? No. The Bears have an injured running back of their own who is not going to play, David Montgomery. And as much as as highly, relatively speaking, that I think of David Montgomery, Damian Williams can do the same stuff, right? And it's sort of a mind over matter or out of sight, out of mind, I suppose, if you will, because he was doing work for the Chiefs, right? And then he made the potential career mistake, unfortunately for him, all of those sorts of things, by sitting out last year. And the Chiefs moved on, right? Whether it was Edwards-Helaire or, they're bringing in Le'Veon Bell and et cetera, right? And so he goes to the free agent market, and the best that he could do is get a backup job. And so he goes from a guy who could have won MVP of the Super Bowl 2 years ago, which nobody's going to remember, right? Because that guy was breaking runs, to, second string on the Bears. Talented guy. So I'm not going to downgrade them because David Montgomery's out. You mentioned Justin Fields, the play calling situation, right? And Nagy just can't get out of his way, right? And it's like he gives the reins over from a play calling standpoint to Bill Lazor. And, you and I talked about this. You're never going to remember this, but last year we talked about the Bears giving play calling reins over to Lazor and thinking that was going to spark Mitch Trubisky because they were going to run with him a little bit more, because we were wondering, why doesn't Trubisky use his legs anymore? That was kind of the main feature for him when they were really successful. Same sort of deal now with Justin Fields, right? Let's get him out of the pocket. Let's get him using his legs. So, again, they covered against the Lions last week. I don't know that was necessarily completely deserved, right? That game could have gone either way, as we talked about on Tuesday. So I'm not getting the parade route ready here for the Bears necessarily, but if that offense can move the ball a little bit, and if that play calling has gotten a little bit better, which, early signs indicate that it has, they can take advantage of a Raiders defense that again got a little exposed this past week. So if the Bears are able to move the ball, and by the way, defensively for the Bears, they play a lot like the Chargers do, right? 4th in the league in least amount of blitzing, right? So, 4th least blitzing team in the league. So if you're not going to blitz Derek Carr, now he's got to throw against 7-man coverages. Not that easy, not as easy for Carr as when he just picks out a guy and goes I'm throwing it up to that guy because I know we get single coverage because of the blitz. Right. So again, if you're going to get that same offense of the Raiders going against that heavy coverage type style with the Bears, that's not great for the Raiders. If we're getting the sort of best potential version here right now from an offensive standpoint from the Bears, those two things, obviously they line up perfectly for some value on the Bears. I think the Bears are very live to win this game and will be included in any round robin money line parlay that I do here. So take the points. Again, if you can find a 6 out there, that's a key number just in case there's overtime. Guess who loves going to overtime? John Gruden and the Raiders, right? You want to make sure if you have to pay a couple extra dollars for that, right? Get maybe a -115, -116, something along those lines. It might require a wait and see approach. If it goes down from 5.5 to 5, is that the end of the world? Not really. Even 4.5, not really the end of the world, right? 5 not being a key number. So again, you could take a wait and see approach or grab the 6 when it comes to the Bears. But that's definitely how I'm playing it. I like them a lot this weekend.
Yeah, we both seem to be liking the Bears so far as we look towards that game. But let's move on to a classic NFC East matchup here. I was about to call it a showdown, but I don't know if I can refer to the Giants and Danny Dimes as a showdown. But here we go anyways. The 1-3 Giants are at the 3-1 Cowboys. Cowboys laying 7 points. I know the Cowboys are rolling. The Giants are coming off a huge upset. I would like to think that this game will be close. But to be honest, the only way I see the Giants covering is on one of those backdoor covers. And the way that I'm used to watching your man's Danny Dimes and the way the Cowboys defense has been ball hawking so far this season, I don't know if that's a good look for the Giants. So I don't like it. I don't like it. And I've learned the ways to not lay so many points all the time. Right. But I'm plugging my nose and I'm taking the Cowboys. I'm rolling with them Cowboys in the 7 points. And I don't like it. And I know what you're going to say.
I tell you what, man, I like that you don't like it, right? I like that you are not to, sort of trained you into this mindset, right? I've hypnotized you in a way here where you're now you now revolt at giving points in a professional football game, right? And yes, it's going to win a fair percentage of the time. But I just like that that's the attitude. Listen, it's funny, right? First impressions or in the NFL, you get, you never say you never get a second chance to make a first impression, right? But in the NFL, you kind of do every time a season starts, right? Week 1, everything's fresh. And then the Giants come out against the Broncos and they do nothing offensively, right? And everybody just restamps their impression of Daniel Jones. But if you look at it, whether it was the Washington football team matchup Or, I mean, the Falcons to a degree, right? They had some red zone issues, but at least they moved the ball. Or last week where Daniel Jones had maybe the best game of his career, certainly the best I've seen him play. All of a sudden you start looking at the numbers a little bit and you go like, maybe this is a showdown, right? Like maybe this Giants offense is showdown adjacent, right? And like whether they get Sterling Shepard back or some of those other weapons, right? Last week had the opportunity for Kadarius Toney, their first round pick, Florida Gator, right? One of the many Florida Gators that left that team after last year. He was outstanding. He was like, he had Tyreek Hill vibes, man. That guy was stopping on a dime. He was doing some very creative, run after the catch type stuff where you're like, oh, this guy is just different, right? And that obviously flashed to the point where he was a first round pick while he's with the Gators. But, it's college football and like guys are just kind of falling around you a lot of times. Like, is that stuff going to play in the NFL? Kind of did, man. It kind of did. And so it's like, wow, wait a second here. I don't know if a year from now we're talking about Kadarius Toney as like Tyreek Hill, the way that we talk about Tyreek Hill. But I imagine the first couple of games of Tyreek Hill, we weren't necessarily like, oh, this guy's going to be sort of a future Hall of Famer type guy, right? We were just kind of like, oh, this guy's got some jam to him here, right? Got a little buzz to him. And so maybe there's a little extra weapon here. And now again, get a couple other guys back here, and Kenny Golladay is certainly back and healthy. And that's a guy that I've liked, obviously back to the Detroit Lions days, but he just couldn't stay healthy. But healthy Kenny Golladay is a really, really good player, right? And Jones is finding Saquon out in the open field. And again, the run game is still really, really grim, et cetera, et cetera. But you're right? The Dallas Cowboys. But when we talk about range, we also have to talk about perception. We're getting to a point where everybody's kind of coming around. And it's funny because like we've talked about this before, right? Before last season, we did a little season preview, and like the Cowboys were all the rage, right? We were like, oh yeah, like maybe they were probably third or fourth favorite in the NFC. We're like, look at this team, like the offense, and they have a lot of players here on defense, and it hasn't gone well for Jalen Smith, and so they let him go. But like just the idea that they don't have to keep a player who is kind of dragging them down defensively, they don't have to keep him on the roster. They don't feel pressure to do that because they have other guys who are better. Like that's a real indicator here that it isn't just scheme change with the Cowboys, which it certainly is, getting away from Nolan and going to Quinn, but it's also talent, right? And we watch Diggs, right? He's got interceptions every day. Quandre Diggs is, like he's got an interception yesterday. I'm pretty sure if Stephon Diggs decided to play some DB, he might have an interception. Tay Diggs might have an interception by the end of the season. So it's just like the defense is working big time for the Cowboys, but everybody sees that now. Yeah. Right. Everybody's aware of it, and people are starting to buy in on this team as being a potential, title contender, if you will. That's bad from a market standpoint, right? That means you are buying high every time that you play the Cowboys. Now, maybe, and again, I've left this open, my ratings column that came out on Tuesday. Like I make the Cowboys, a certain rating, and it's an upgrade from the start of the season, and it's been a slow upgrade. And, there are times when with teams that I'll have them upgraded to the point where like you can't go any further. I'm willing to acknowledge that I can go further with the Cowboys, right? Because I see it like on different, whether it's Diggs, whether it's the linebacking core, whether it was, a relatively deep defensive line, there's reason to believe that defense might be good. And we know what the offense is all about, right? I don't have to sit here and tell you about the offense. And so I leave it open to the possibility that they might be a 75, an 80, right? Like they might be up there. I'm just not willing to sort of pay that price just yet. And right now, that's the price that's being asked to get paid here. So I think the Giants, because what we've seen from them offensively, and because like it's just that matchup too. Like I know that's not really a sort of handicap.
No, I got you.
But like because that offense, I think, could potentially hang with the Cowboys here. I do like the Giants plus the points, right? And you give me the full 7, like I will take that, and I will take my chances with that. Is that necessarily a contest play for me? No, but it's a bet that I'm willing to make come Sunday.
I got you. Another one here. You're on the Giants. I'm on the Cowboys. It's a beautiful thing. This is why I enjoy this so much, because as I'm saying this, I'm plugging my nose and I'm going to be watching as Danny Dimes driving down the field for the backdoor cover. I can see it now. But what I also want to see on Sunday, 2-2 Niners at the 4-0 Cardinals. Cardinals laying 5 points at home. And to me, that's just way too many points. These NFC West teams are so close. And even in the games that are blowouts, they're still kind of close, if that makes sense. The Niners always play the Cards tough. Plus, they have a week to install the real Trey Lance plays, right? Which I know Shanahan's just been like hiding somewhere in like the depths of his playbook. So I'll take the points gladly here with the Niners.
Yeah, this is a situation we talk about it, right? The computer flip it upside down, shake it to see, like, there's just no way I can get to 5.5 with the Cardinals, right? I'm like, my numbers, I'm looking at my numbers, I'm like, okay, well, maybe if I, shake up the computer, turn it upside down. Am I reading this the wrong way? Like, it's just like 5.5 just does not happen. Does that mean that the Cardinals can't win by 6? Of course not, right? This game could go to overtime. We could be absolutely correct in our assumptions that these teams are equal, in the same way that we were, I think, pretty correct at any point really during the game last night that the Rams and the Seahawks are pretty equal. Right now, again, everything shakes out and, certain plays get made or don't get made, and you get a 9-point win or what maybe probably should have been a 6-point win last night, right? Like, these things happen. Even San Francisco and Seattle a couple of weeks ago, right? Like, or literally last week, it's like, yeah, it was a blowout, if you will, because it wasn't, a hotly contested fourth quarter. But even in the first half, right, you're like, oh yeah, like, these teams are pretty equal. Like, so you can throw a blanket on all 4 of these teams. And you're right? Like, whether it's me turning my computer upside down to try to figure out if these numbers make any sense to get this to 5.5, or your boy Shanahan, he's turning the book over, right? He's reading it from the back page because that's where all the Trey Lance plays are. He's got to install those now, right? He gets a week of those, and it's just going to be running, right? Misdirection runs, right? The thing that we like about San Francisco, the thing that travels for San Francisco is those misdirection runs. And like, all of a sudden, Kyle Juszczyk has the ball, or he's running free in the secondary because everybody just assumed that he was going to be blocking on this play. And it's like, you or I can make that throw, right? Like Jimmy G.
How is Kittle wide open?
Yeah. Right. It's like, well, because he's been hitting people in the face for 2.5 quarters, and like, he just ran by a guy instead of hitting them in the face, right? Like, that's the stuff, right? And so if it weren't for the next game that I think we're going to talk about, this would be the red light special, right? Like, this is the one where I think San Francisco's live to win this game. We talked about like it traveling. San Francisco played like 4 games in Arizona last year, right? Like, it is not much in the way of physical distance travel or unfamiliarity, right? So how are we giving anything for the Cardinals from a home field advantage, right? We can't. By the way, in Arizona, December 26th last year, Kyler Murray still in the lineup. Your guy CJ Beathard in the lineup for San Francisco. 20-12 for San Francisco, right? Like, and I broke this down again this week. They handle Kyler Murray really well, do the 49ers, right? And again, it's all relative. Like, he's still running for 60 yards. He's still throwing for 250 yards, but it isn't a total catastrophe. Again, I'm not smart enough to know what they're doing. And maybe you can make the case, well, he was, pretty banged up at the end of that season and et cetera here. And by the way, like, the Cardinals are undefeated. And congratulations to them for being the last team to be undefeated. If you had bet on the Cardinals to be the last undefeated team of the season, you have made yourself a pretty good penny. Yeah. That being said, right, like, heavy is the head that wears the crown. You have that now on your shoulders, right? We just talked about the Cowboys and all the credit that they're getting, right? People are head over heels for the Cardinals here because they've won 4 games. Those 4 games included a pretty easy walkover game against the Tennessee Titans, right? Yeah. This is a team that just lost to the Jets. I'm not that thrilled with the Tennessee Titans so far this season. This is a team that was down 9 points to Urban Meyer's Jacksonville Jaguars. And Trevor Lawrence throws an interception, and then Arizona ends up covering the spread, and all's well that ends well. But if you're watching that game in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, you're not that psyched about the Arizona Cardinals. We have talked at length about the field goal that went wide right for the Minnesota Vikings that would have handed the Cardinals that victory. So it's not like this is 4-0 juggernaut stuff here where, like, how could anybody lose, right? Or how could they be beat? This is just a situation of, like, things went the right way for them for 4 games. I don't want to pay for that. I don't want to pay for the 4 games that they've just had. And that's what we're doing with this tax right now that's on the Cardinals. Now, does that mean we have to watch Trey Lance and worry about his accuracy and all of that sort of thing? Yes. But if there's one thing I believe in when it comes to Shanahan, well, it's certainly not his game management. It's his game planning. Right. And from a game management standpoint, he's going to be really conservative. And that might help us when it comes to having these points in our back pocket instead of hurt us when we're asking him to cover as a favorite. So Shanahan as an underdog with that run game, devalued as much as they are with an overvalued Cardinals team. Like, this is an easy bet to make. Never an easy bet to win, but an easy bet to make on the San Francisco 49ers. And again, if you get the 6, try to get the 6.
I love that. And please understand the difference. I love it. The 1-3 Miami Dolphins at the 3-1 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'm seeing this line at -10. I never like laying double-digit points. My rule initially is to, if you don't tell me the teams and you just tell me one team's favored by double digits, I'm going to take the points.
Right.
But I really don't like it here, especially after we saw how many injuries and how those injuries have affected the Bucs. We saw that against the Pats on Sunday night. Hopefully, your boy, Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, can steal some tips from his former team and get his boy, Jacoby Brissett, to check down his way to covering 10 points. I'm on the Dolphins here. What are you? You alluded to it, but I think we're on the same side here.
Oh, and then some, my friend. It's the red light special. It's the red light special, right? It's the upset of the week. It's the the TLC red light special, right? Lisa Left Eye Lopez. When it's good, it's really good. Mm-hmm. When it's not, it might burn down your house, right? And we're not putting a ton of it on the Dolphins necessarily, but this is a Dolphins money line play for me. Again, there's going to be, let's put it sort of in round terms, right? There's going to be 4 times this year where we looked to grab a double-digit underdog on the money line at a price of better than plus 300. And if we do that 4 times and we can win one of those times, we'll be profitable. This is one of those times. And it's pretty simple here, right? So, let's do the offense defense thing. Tampa Bay's offense right now without Rob Gronkowski isn't the peak version of the Buccaneers, right? I don't want to be backing a team, especially laying 10 points, if I'm not getting the peak version of that team, and certainly of this unit. And so they go and they get that win against the Patriots last week, and, they don't crack 20 points. Well, okay, who's to say that the Dolphins can't do that same thing to keep the Buccaneers under 20 points? You mentioned the coach, right? You don't think he was watching every minute detail of his former team's defensive game plan? He used to be the defensive coordinator over there. Maybe he's given your boy Bill a phone call here, maybe a text, right? Maybe they're on Face Chat or Snapbook or whatever how Bill would put it, right? Imagine he's just got all these sort of latent accounts on all these social media things.
Bill Belichick's definitely on TikTok. Definitely.
That's definitely. Right. So hopefully the message doesn't disappear, for the Dolphins this week defensively. I think that they can shut that team down. They got beat up a little bit by the Colts through the run game, but that's not what the Buccaneers do, right? And if you get a steady diet of Leonard Fournette, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape to cover 10 points in this game. And if you're in good shape to cover 10 points in this game, there is value to you on the money line, right? If this is going to be a 1-score game, which I think it is, then just inherently there has to be value on a plus 350 type of a money line. Let's talk a little defense here when it comes to the Buccaneers. Cluster injuries, right? You can survive an injury to a guy. You can survive maybe 2. But when we're talking about basically the entire starting secondary of this team getting wiped out, and as we talked on Tuesday, it's Richard Sherman is coming off the streets. They're going to have other guys coming off the streets that don't have the brand name of Richard Sherman. And so, Jacoby Brissett and the Dolphins offense, not overly explosive. But you know what wasn't explosive? the New England Patriots offense, right? But they did enough to get it done where, again, maybe the kick goes in, maybe the defense stops Brady, at the end. Who knows? A couple of things go a little bit differently and they win that game. But again, I think you're going to get another game that is kind of in the teens again. Now, it's not going to necessarily be raining, though, in Miami. You never know. It might rain for 20 minutes as hard as you've ever seen it in your life, and things might get sloppy, et cetera, et cetera. I shouldn't say Miami. I should say Tampa, of course, Florida in general. So yeah, I just think this is kind of just a mucky game where if Tampa Bay can get out of it the same way they have all of these other games, because again, when we talked about this Patriots matchup last week, we hearkened back to the Falcons game and the idea that that was a 3-point game. And if that can be a 3-point game in the fourth quarter, no matter how it goes the rest of the way with multiple Matt Ryan pick sixes, if it's a 3-point game late in that game, that's a really good bet at plus, it was 12.5, I think, that week. We're getting pretty close to that with a functional Miami team that we're getting these points because they didn't look good last week. But as you know, right, you are never as bad as you looked the week before, and you are never as good as you looked the week before. And finally, you've got the letdown situation here. And it's Tampa Bay's going home. But again, it's not a ton of travel for Miami here. The players on Tampa Bay, right? They know what Tom Brady means to that team. He won them the Super Bowl, right? They were an 8-8 team before he got there. It's not like they don't care about Tom or they don't respect what he does. They wanted that game for him last week as much as, he wanted it for himself. And now you come back and you're okay, game against the Dolphins, I guess, right? They're going to do just enough to potentially win this game. And when you get into that low scoring, just enough to win this game type scene, that's where weird stuff can happen. And this Miami Dolphins team is known for turning teams over. They didn't do it last week against Carson Wentz, which might have been the upset of all upsets in the entire week. What if they get a pick or two against Tom here, right? Because he doesn't have Gronkowski to throw to, that maybe Mike Evans bobbles a ball, Antonio Brown bobbles a ball. Things can turn really quickly. And when we're looking at a money line of plus 300 and change here, I'm all about that. So absolutely, red light special. It's our first of 3 or 4 double-digit dogs that we like to win this week.
I like it. But if you're that worried about the Bucs possibly falling here, the Bucs obviously would be a lot of people's favorites for maybe a survivor pick. So if you don't really like the Bucs and the 10 points, where are we leaning survivor-wise?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so that's exactly it. I'm sitting around. I will be thrilled with as many people who take the Bucs as possible. Obviously, a couple of different reasons, right? One, I just talked about I don't want to lay 10 points with a team that I'm not getting the best version of. Mm-hmm. I also don't want a survivor pick of a team that I'm not getting the best version of. And maybe that means I'm going to have to use the Bucs later on as a 6-point favorite or a 5-point favorite or something like that. But if they're the best version of themselves, i.e. healthiest, then I'm fine with that. And so, people can take this sort of percent, 80%, 50%, however you want to frame it. They can happily take the Buccaneers. I'd be thrilled with that, which means we got to pick somebody else. And you've seen, again, we like to use the market. We like to use point spreads and money lines to kind of decide from a value standpoint what we should do for survivor. The Minnesota Vikings have moved from 7.5-point favorites to 9.5-point favorites. We have watched them, the market all decide that 7.5 points, which is a lot of points in the NFL, as you know, wasn't enough, right? We need to favor the Vikings by more than this. Now, am I dying to lay 9.5 points with the Vikings? No, not necessarily, right? But it gives you an indicator here of what the market thinks. The chances are that this Lions team stuns the Vikings. So when we talk about, do I get the best version of this team? I'm getting a pretty healthy Vikings team, the Dalvin Cook thing notwithstanding, but that, unfortunately, again, not for fantasy football people out there who just, ride or die with the big names here. Is Dalvin Cook expendable? We've talked about it, man. Kind of is, right? Alexander Madison, his twin out there, similar number. They both got the dreadlocks coming out of the helmet, right? You don't even really know. You're watching the game and you're like, did Dalvin Cook just bust a 20-yard run? It's no, that was Alexander Madison. You're like, oh, come on. Yeah. And so, if that's your biggest injury issue, I'm okay with that. Speaking of injury issues, if we're fading a team for survivor, we would like the worst possible version of themselves. Uh-huh. What do we like about the Lions, right? The trenches, Dan Campbell, he's ready to suit up, and that, the team is sort of taking his personality of let's hit people in the mouth. Well, what if 2 to 3 of your best offensive linemen aren't available? That's a problem. Center Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker, left tackle, and potentially first round draft pick Penei Sewell all could be out for this game. Not an ideal circumstance when you're going against Danielle Hunter, who is like right up there when it comes to sacks this season. So like offensively, I mean, we know the Vikings are going to be able to move the ball against the Lions defense. Again, by the way, they're without Romeo Okwara, their best pressure guy on the defensive line, outside linebacker type position. The secondary is atrocious. You got Thielen and Jefferson are just going to have a field day out there. And then again, from an offensive standpoint, Jared Goff under pressure here potentially. Like it's got the recipe for disaster. I may just lay those points with the Vikings. It's certainly, you know, the market has obviously sort of backed that concept up by moving this up from 7.5 to 9.5. Again, it's Survivor, right? There's 18 weeks in the season. Certain contests, you have to pick 20 teams. Are the Vikings a top 20 team in the league? Absolutely. So in theory, you are going to have to use them eventually. There will never be a better spot than a mangled, downtrodden Lions team coming to town who are playing their second straight road game while the Vikings are playing their second or third straight home. I believe it's their third straight home game and coming off a loss, right? So again, full attention. Everybody's locked in here. You know, we don't think the season's over. We've been competitive, but we got to get this win against the Lions, right? It means as much to them as it will all season long. So to me, relative no-brainer here with the Vikings.
A foe of the Vikings highlight the next matchup we got here is a 3-1 Packers, 3-point favorites heading into Cincinnati, and the 3-1 Bengals. This is more about me fading the Packers. I can't lie, because I'm still not trusting or believing at the high end Packers. I feel like this is straight brand name stuff we got going here. But for that reason, I'm taking the Bengals at home and the points. If the game that could be a shootout, lots of scoring, I'll sit back and sit on the points at the end.
I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed. This is back in the day, if you will. This is the sucker bet of the week, right? Ooh. This is like how are the Packers only 3-point favorites against the Bengals? And you know, to reframe it for everybody, you know, now we've sort of rebranded it the like night out in Vegas where you can't imagine it going badly and all of a sudden you wake up the next morning and it went badly. That's laying the points here with the Packers. Like this is preseason, a 6-point favorite type of a game. And then it was opened at 3.5. And again, the early money, often, you know, pretty good indicator, took the Bengals, right? That's not a thing that usually happens when a high brand type team like the Packers takes on a team low brand like the Bengals. Like often it's let's wait and see how many points we can get with the Bengals. In this case, the market was like, no, we're going to gobble up that hook. We're going to grab that plus 3.5. We're going to do it now. Right? We're not going to wait around to see if the public comes in on the Packers, which they will. Key thing here, massive injury that very few are talking about. Jair Alexander, you know, shutdown corner, absolute lockdown guy, like that old sort of Deion Sanders thing where it's like Deion's got one side of the field covered and now the offense has to deal with the other half. Very much the same thing for the Packers defense, right? And at first blush, I was like, well, if Joe Mixon's out here, are the Bengals going to be able to run the ball? Because whenever I look to fade the Packers, I go, okay, can they move the ball in that defense via the run game, right? That's how the Vikings beat the Packers, last season. And when they do, right? It's like Dalvin Cook at 150 yards. Joe Mixon's certainly capable of that. He may be out. Is Samaje Perine capable of that, right? We just talked about the downgrade from Dalvin Cook to, Madison not being that big of a deal. Maybe it's not that big of a deal here for the Bengals either. But more importantly, when it comes to this Alexander injury, Joe Burrow can pick any one of those weapons now, right? And it was already going to be kind of a rough matchup for the Packers because of the depth at wide receiver that the Bengals have. Because when Alexander can come in, he can just pick out, the best receiver on your team, shut that guy down. And if it's a downgrade to the rest of the crew, it's not going to be as decisive when you get into the Kevin King matchups of the world. So now they have a rookie as their best corner, do the Packers, but you've got the Chases, right? Like the Boyd, like all of these other guys here for the Bengals that Burrow can go 5 wide. He can go 4 wide and he can be like, okay, like, who's the bad matchup? And there's going to be a ton of bad matchups out there when it comes to the Packers. So I think this is a full-on shootout here, right? I think Rodgers is going to be able to be absolutely fine. Like we know what we're going to get with Rodgers. It's just like okay, last score type, situation wins here. You want to have as many points as possible, I suppose. I'm not necessarily dying to bet the Bengals here, especially not getting that hook. If Sunday rolls around and a ton of Packers money comes in recreationally, and there's that book that will move it up to 3.5, that's where I will hop in on the Bengals. So not a massive play for me necessarily, but really just kind of a warning shot as we do, right? Like, don't get suckered into the Packers. Could they win? Could they cover? Absolutely. But this is one that you're going to be shaking your head at potentially on Sunday night, going like, I was so close, but who knew that was going to come, right? We just want to sort of point out to people, like, it's a very real possibility that the Bengals win this game.
No, I got you. And you mentioned a night out in Vegas, which takes my mind to the Vegas zone, and a game that I kind of feel like we need to mention here. Vegas zone, Vegas, partying, your man's Urban Meyer, lots of stuff going on here. But we got the 2-2 Titans at 4.5-point favorites in Jacksonville against the 0-4 Jags. This one has my radar going off in the Vegas zone. I know there's a lot going on with the aforementioned Urban Meyer and the Jags right now, but no matter how much your boy likes to party and be in these streets, I cannot be in these streets betting on the Titans as 4.5-point favorites versus anyone, not even the Jags. So I'm here taking the points and the Jags. I was going to say and Urban Meyer, but I'm taking the Jags.
Yeah, and this is the unfortunate part where you have to make a bet in this, or have to make a pick in this game, because I don't really want anything to do with this game all that much. I mean, we'll see where this line closes. And listen, your guy Herb, right? Like Columbus, Ohio, might as well be Vegas for Herb, right? Because it's never going to get better. Like, he's not going to get the same run in Vegas that he can get when he goes to his own personal restaurant in Columbus. But we sort of back ourselves into the hedge when it comes to talking about Urban Meyer. But it's a real football thing too, right? Like, you watch the clip of the team breaking the huddle, 1, 2, 3 grind, right? Like, they obviously don't respect him that much. But the thing is, like, there might be some value here on the Jags. Like, this is a game where normally I'd be like, yes, like we have to take the Jags here because we don't think highly of the Titans, right? Yeah. But that has been, Titans have been a fade all season long, with the exception of their game against Seattle. So you go, okay, we should be taking the Jags, but the narrative comes out like, okay, are they going to quit on this team? Do they respect him? Blah, 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 blah. It might kind of galvanize him, right? Like, if you don't like your coach and he does something stupid, and like, especially now you see them like making fun of it, like, that's actually a spot where, like, if you're on a team, you're feeling a little bit looser about things, and you're not as tight because like Urban Meyer's going to get mad at you. You can kind of go out and just kind of ball. Yeah. And so if it means that this line moves up because people don't want anything to do with the Jags because of Urban Meyer, I don't buy that, because it's not like they're going to quit. That's not how football works. Like, you and I talk about this all the time when it gets to late season type stuff, right? The whole quitting thing is very few and far between, and certainly not in early October, because these guys are all putting stuff on tape, right? This is the resume. This is, if you don't like it in Jacksonville, play well and get out of Jacksonville, because you will be desirable to another team. You don't play poorly to get out of Jacksonville, because if you do so, you will be selling cars at a, Ford dealership around the corner, right? Like, that's how it works in the NFL. And so, as I talk about it, it's like, I'm becoming more and more likely to make a bet on the Jags. It's just not a game that like you have to bet, because it's like, I don't really want to watch this game, right? It's going to be probably pretty boring game. I'm certainly afraid of Derrick Henry just running over the Jags, but it's not like they're going to get run over by Derrick Henry because Urban Meyer is getting his groove on the side. Right? Like, that's just not how this works. They're going to get run over by Derrick Henry because they kind of always get run over by Derrick Henry. And so, yes, I'm probably going to end up making a small bet here on the Jags. I am probably not going to watch 1 second of this game until I absolutely have to, right, in rewatch form, just to sort of, obviously keep up with what happened, right? But it's not something that you have to focus on. And so if you don't want to, but really moreover, like, don't get caught up in the whole Urban Meyer's doing this, so I have to bet the Titans type of a thing. Yeah. No, you do not have to bet the Titans. You may not have to bet the Titans at any point this season.
Agreed. Now, before we get into the primetime games on Sunday and Monday night, a little reminder that if you haven't signed up yet for our weekly DRF newsletters, you're really missing out. The Sunday Scoop newsletter is 75% against the spread in 2021. Again, I'm going to repeat that. The Sunday Scoop newsletter is hitting at 75% against the spread in 2021. So make sure you get in before this weekend's email goes out. Sign up now. Go to drf.com/sports. Again, drf.com/sports. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter. But let's race through here a couple of the prime time matchups. We'll start with the rematch. Sunday night, the rematch of the AFC Championship game. You got the 3-1 Bills going at the 2-2 Chiefs. Chiefs at home, 2.5-point favorites. I really cannot believe I'm here saying this, but I think the Bills win this game outright. I just think they're better. The Chiefs defense is trizash. And I mean, there'll be a lot of points put up. And again, I'm just going to be happy to take the points. Now, I know there is part of me in the back of my mind where I'm sitting there on Sunday night watching Josh Allen just do all kinds of bleepery, I'll say.
For sure.
And remind me why I don't rate him. But my brain is telling me I got to take the points with the Bills here, because when I watch that Chiefs defense, I'm just like, they can't get us. Like, they can't get stops to save their life against a competent offense.
Yeah, and listen, I can't disagree with that necessarily, right? But like, is your brain telling you that, or is like your brain from like football games past telling you that? Because like we were here, right? We were here in the AFC Championship. Speaking of Sunday nights, right? We were here going like, yeah, I think the Bills have a shot here, 2.5-point spread. Like,
I was on the Chiefs.
Right. Yeah. But so that's the thing, right? Like, for those of us who may have been on the Bills that day, like we were doing the never again thing, like the never again, are we not going to take the Chiefs when it's under a field goal? Right. Okay. Or like if we're ever getting points with the Chiefs, i.e. like last year when they were on the road against the Ravens. And so like, yeah, like the defense is rough, but like it kind of always has been. You know what I mean? Like it kind of always has been. And like, and the defense is rough in a way that you can really rely on the other team. We talk about this all the time, that you can rely on the other team to score last if it's not like absolutely necessary for them to get a stop. Andy Reid does not care, right? Like he just wants to win that game. Yeah. And so you go, okay, well, why is this just 2.5? And it's like, well, because people are talking themselves into the Bills, right? And so like, I was, again, my first blush was like, yeah, I'm kind of in on that too. But then I'm like, 2.5. Like, it doesn't this, I don't like to do the thing where it's like, I'm going to feel dumb if I don't bet this team, because that's how they get you, right? Like that's how a lot of these lines are created.
That's why Vegas is rich.
That's right. And so first and foremost, right? Like the 2.5, like what's that first inclination, right? Like let's get that drilled into our head. 2.5 up to 8.5. Right. And so whether or not you think that Chiefs offense is going to pull it out in the end, which is a very real, responsible sort of take here, you can back the Bills here by getting them up to 8.5. We just mentioned the Cleveland Browns +2 as a potential teaser leg that we may or may not have used with the Seahawks. Now, again, right, like just because it didn't work out for the Seahawks doesn't make it less likely, doesn't make it more likely. Just it's the same amount of likelihood that getting those 8 points with these really high profile good games is probably going to be a really profitable thing here, right? So you can tie some teasers to this game at getting +8.5. As far as the 2.5, like I said, right? I don't necessarily want to be giving, the Bills anything here from a point standpoint, because I do think they could win this game, right? Again, because I thought they could win the AFC Championship last year. So that would be quite the turnaround if all of a sudden I was like, oh no, they can't win this game in a game that is set up very similarly. But again, Chiefs -2.5 under a field goal, like these opportunities, especially at home, do not come around very often. So it's hard for me not to back the Chiefs in that situation if I had to make a play on the point spread. So again, I rather just take the tease, bump it up to 8.5, get all those points, hopefully have that live going into Sunday night. And now I can just watch a thriller, which I think this game will be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make interesting points, and this is why I love this pod so much, doing this pod and learning so much about the different angles and the different ways that you can come in and figure out how to gain value on just one specific game. And so, as mentioned, I always repeat this stuff every week because I want people to kind of really understand the difference in how you and I really talk about like one game. Like Matt just gave you how many different ways for you to look at this game and hit different angles. Whereas I'm just sitting here like, well, 2.5 points. I'd rather be sitting on the points at the end of the game. So hopefully people are picking that up and understanding there's multiple ways to go at this when you're trying to gain some value and win some money. And that's all we're trying to help you do. Right.
And again, money line too, right? Like when we get under that 3, in a lot of cases, maybe it's just about just hitting that money line, right? Because again, doesn't this feel like either it's the Bills like coming out party, right? Where they win this game and they go, okay, we are now here and we're ready to, get after it here in the AFC. Or it's, I feel so dumb for, fading the Chiefs and they end up winning by 3, 7, even more than that, right? Like if you believe in the Bills to the point where, you do, like, kind of just take the money line here, plus 125, like that kind of type number. And again, it might not win, but to me, that's a far better bet than laying like a minus 110 price and hoping it comes down to a 2-point conversion or a 1-point game. Because by the way, like a high total game, right? We expect a lot of scoring here. That means points become less valuable, right?
Yeah.
That means we might get ourselves into a 35-28 game where like, listen, Bills are going to have to score some touchdowns. That was the big mistake last year that we made fun of because they kept kicking field goals. So they're going to come out, going for touchdowns here. We might just get that sort of thing where it's like field goal kickers can go home here. We're doing touchdowns. So you might have a close game that ends in a 7-point, victory one way or another. And in that case, right, like you might as well just have that extra juice there when it comes to the money line.
I want to know who's going to have the extra juice on Monday Night Football. We've got an interesting matchup. The 1-3 Colts at the 3-1 Ravens. Ravens laying the 7 points as the Ravens are favored here at home. And I'll say this, a wise man named Matt Russell always tells me sometimes you got to get a little uncomfortable. And taking Carson Wentz on the road on Monday night is definitely an uncomfortable place for me.
Yeah.
But ultimately I can't lay the 7 points. I just can't do it. So I'm sitting on Carson Wentz and I don't like it at all.
Good, because my uncomfortable place is laying points. And that's where I'm going to spend Monday because the Ravens are the bullies on the block, right? Yeah. Like we know that. And who's going to, curl up into a ball here or who's going to panic throw his way into problems? Gentleman by the name of Carson Wentz, right? And so like this is that game where, the Ravens, Monday nighter, home game, this is where they get some attention because they don't have a ton of attention, right? No. Which is kind of strange because they did beat the Chiefs, which like you think would get you some attention. It's like because they had to get a miracle kick from Justin Tucker to beat the Lions, it's like people are kind of sleeping on him a little bit. And that game was way under the radar last week against Denver. And of course, Teddy Bridgewater goes out and it's like kind of this like meaningless game where it's like, congrats on the win, but like, how much do we really sort of, how much extra credit do you get? This is one where if you were looking to bet a Lamar Jackson, like MVP type of a ticket, like maybe you hop in right now, right? Because maybe this is one where you get a Colts team. They just won a game. It's their second straight road game. So they're flying from Miami back to Indy and then now out to Baltimore. Like, this is kind of a tough spot, right, for them. Whereas Baltimore gets set for, just set yourself up here. They don't play another road game until like mid-November at this point. Oof. Right? Like this is their time to shine. And so when we're talking about like buying low in different markets, whether it's maybe divisional, conference, or Lamar Jackson MVP, like this is the run that they should go on where they win 4 or 5 games in a row. And that's either going to be impressive wins when they take on teams like in division, like the Browns, etc., or when they just hammer a team who just isn't ready to go, like I think the Colts might be. Right. And so I think this is a big game for Lamar Jackson. And at 7, again, I think the market still kind of gives a little too much credit to a Colts team for that victory last week. A Colts team that I just do not think is very good. And so I think you're going to get bully on the block Ravens here. I think you get a big win out of them this week. Something along the lines of like, I think they can put up 30 points. And listen, and if the run game's not going for the Colts, which the Ravens can stop, if that run game's not going, this could get ugly quick. But you know how the Ravens work, right? It's not necessarily ugly quick. It's ugly late because they beat you down to the point where like you have nothing left by the middle of the third quarter, and Lamar Jackson is springing 50-yard touchdowns because you're just tired of getting hit in the mouth and filling the gaps and being defensively responsible. And then he's just taking off like a shot. I think it's that type of game on Monday night for the Ravens.
Oof. Has me nervous already. And we're not even at Sunday yet, much less Monday night. And I'm already nervous for this game.
Yeah.
So
we're not even at Saturday yet.
Right. Speaking of Saturday, though, let's switch some gears to the NCAA.
Let's go.
NCAA picks are clicking at over 60% in our hurry up offense segment. But before we get there, we always like to discuss some of the big boy games. So we have to start with a big boy matchup as the Iowa Hawkeyes, 1.5 favorites against Penn State. This might be as big as it gets for this season so far. Who you got in this game, Matt?
I don't know. No, you know what? I love our people out in Iowa, our fans there. Just tons of people. Just they're sitting around the fire, just listening to the podcast out in Iowa. Listen, I was hoping this was going to get to 3. I kind of like Penn State in this one. Listen, and we've been backing Iowa. We've been actually really kind of on top of Iowa this year. We've done really well with Iowa. Any points that I can get here in a game that we just talked about Buffalo and Kansas City being a touchdown game. This is going to be a field goal game, right? This is going to be like kicking, we're talking 19-17 and maybe the year, right? Maybe not the score. But no, this could be like a 19-17 type of a score, right? Where it's like 2 points matter, 1 point matters, right? This is one where it's like, I don't necessarily even want Penn State on the money line. I just want a point. I just want 2 points, right? 3 points would be an absolute dream. And you've watched this line flip to Iowa as the favorite, up to 2.5, and then it stopped there before it got to 3 and has ticked its way back to a 1.5 type area here. So again, not a strong bet necessarily. Just give me as many points. If it moved to Penn State being favored, by the way, by 1.5 or 2, I would absolutely be on Iowa as the home underdog here. But this is just fundamentally an issue where, again, I like this Penn State team just a little bit more. Kinnick Stadium going to be rocking. I completely understand the hostile environment concept here and how great Iowa is at turning the ball over. But Sean Clifford, I don't know why, I don't know how, but he hasn't been turnover Sean Clifford this season. And I guess I'm going to rely on him to not turn the ball over a ton here in a raucous crowd. But you can just sort of hear in my voice, like, that's really just kind of a hope here than necessarily a belief. But yeah, I mean, give me Penn State here with as many points as I can possibly drag out of the market. But a really interesting game here with 2 top 5 teams that I don't think we thought would be in the top 5 this early on in the season.
Yeah, totally interesting game there. And another one as we have a neutral site game, Texas versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma, 3.5 point favorites here at the Cotton Bowl. What do you like here?
Yeah, and I'm calling it the Red River Shootout. Like, I don't care, right? Like, that's the name of it for as long as I've lived until a couple of years ago where they started changing it. They made it the Red River Rivalry, did it again, hit it a bunch of times on the podcast on Tuesday. I like Texas. I like Texas here. I know Oklahoma's run defense is like amazing. They give up like 1/3 of a yard after contact. Like, they will basically stuff you. Meanwhile, Texas run for like 250 yards on the ground. Like, that's an incredible matchup. This is the game I'm most excited for. Pomp and pageantry, right? You're going to have the insane crowd at Kinnick, but you're also going to have the half burnt orange, half red crowd at the Cotton Bowl. I love that. You get I'm pretty sure the Ferris wheel is going to be going in the background. Hopefully that's, cranked up. There's cotton candy everywhere. What a great atmosphere. I absolutely love it. Give me Bijan Robinson. Like, we talked about him on Tuesday, as far as like, this is the chance for him to show out from a Heisman candidacy where we think that there is a void for somebody to do something awesome. So let's grab him, Heisman 40-1, and let's grab Texas +3. It was 3.5 earlier on the week. So I think, you can recognize there that there was some value with that hook. Still think there's some value here. Gus Johnson's going to be going out of his mind. Fox broadcast, going to be awesome. So let's grab as many points as we can with this and hope Bijan Robinson, shows out, right? And it's not going to get any harder for him this season. So this is his opportunity to really make a name for himself.
And we've been keeping track lately of Georgia and Alabama, the two teams that seem to be separating themselves from the rest of the class in the NCAA. First up, we got Georgia's 15.5-point favorites at Auburn. But then we also have Alabama's 18-point favorites, at Texas A&M. Two massive spreads again. Yeah. Do you like both laying those points?
I don't really like either laying the points. Okay. I don't really want to be involved in these games necessarily. I think we kind of, everybody got their lesson, right? When it comes to, these, too many points. Different story is these teams are going on the road, right? Against functional teams, both teams that had relatively high hopes here. I don't know that there's going to be a ton of scoring in the Georgia-Auburn game. I think Auburn's defense can do a little bit better, especially from a run defense standpoint, right? Because LSU's run offense isn't any good, but they couldn't move the ball against Auburn last week and allowed Auburn to hang in to get that win. And thankfully they did, because that makes this game a little bit more interesting. I'm more interested in the under in this game. And you know me, I don't love totals. I certainly don't bet them, in the NFL and very rarely in college football. But if you had to do something, right? If I don't want to lay the points with Georgia because I'm not sure that they can get enough points to get over that threshold. And I certainly don't think Auburn's going to have any kind of a time here to score against Georgia. This just kind of feels like 20-6. 20-7, something like that. And we're looking at a total that's 45 here. I just don't know how either of those teams get to that point. So I might make a little exception to my rule here in not betting totals and grab the under in this game. And as far as Alabama and Texas A&M is concerned, right? Texas A&M thought to be a top 5 team. We talked about them before the season as maybe they could shoehorn their way in. And do we want to back them for a title potentially? And this is why we don't, right? Because they didn't have enough. And now they're just sort of this middling SEC team that is in, tough games against Mississippi State and so on and so forth. And so I don't want Texas A&M in this game, but again, road Alabama. Listen, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but we're talking 18 points. We're talking a 3-touchdown, necessity here coming off of a really big game against their former, offensive coordinator in Lane Kiffin. So it's a tough spot for Alabama. So I don't want to be given the points there. But I certainly don't trust Zach Calzada at Texas A&M. Didn't do it last week, right? We were all over Mississippi State on the money line. That was a really great result for us. So no thanks to that game whatsoever. Side, total, nothing, right? Just let Alabama win and let's just move on with our lives.
Well, we can keep things moving here to the part of the show that I know you wait for all week long. You hear the beat, you start to get hype, you resist the urge to get your two-step on, but instead you give us the rest of your NCAA picks for this weekend, aka the hurry up offense. So I'm going to hurry up and just get out of your way. I hear the music already, so I'm going to let you go, my dude. Do your thing.
All right, let's do this thing. I just grabbed a sip of water here because, last week we did 20 games, and I looked at it and I said, you know what, man? That's too many. Never 20 games ever again. So we have 23 games this week. Let's go. One Friday game worked out great for us last week as we went 2-0 on Friday, 2-0 on Thursday night this week. So maybe these weekday night games are our jam here. This one's going to be hideous. Temple plus 29 against Cincinnati. You're like, what? That's our team. Cincinnati is our squad. Huge win last week at Notre Dame, right? Pats on the back. Everybody's super excited. How do you get up for this game? Listen, they're going to win this game against Temple, right? They're not going to lose this game. But we're talking 4 touchdowns and we're still in the clear. I'm going to take the Temple Owls here. Their quarterback is back. This, 6'5" dual threat guy. It's like a budget Philly version of Cam Newton. I think they can get just enough done. They beat Memphis outright last week as 10-point underdogs. I think that flew under the radar here. So give me all of those points when it comes to Temple. Saturday, let's do this thing. Arkansas, plus 5.5 at Ole Miss. This line opened around pick'em, like Ole Miss -1. This is like the consolation game from those games that we talked about last week between, obviously, with Alabama and Georgia. And now, oddly enough, these teams meet. I think this is an easier game to get up for Arkansas than it is for Ole Miss. They had the popcorn situation going, right? Lane's making all these promises, and they just absolutely all over the field, right? Meanwhile, Arkansas gets just their teeth kicked in by Georgia. And it wasn't for lack of trying, right? It's just Georgia's really, really good and has some legit dudes here. Arkansas can still play defense. They can still run the football. They are going to do both of those things against Ole Miss. And this game is going to be closer than the 6 points indicate. We talked about the Temple game. How about another one? Maryland plus 21 against Ohio State. Again, Ohio State has bigger fish to fry here coming up on their schedule with games against Penn State and games against Michigan. Maryland can move the ball down the field with Talia Tagovailoa, right? And the Ohio State back end, their secondary has been a bit of a question mark this season. I think Maryland scores just enough to hang in this game, something along the lines of 45 to 27, like something like that, where it's like the defense isn't going to stop Ohio State necessarily, but the offense could keep up. Michigan State at Rutgers. Michigan State undefeated. They go on the road to Rutgers, who just got their teeth kicked in by Ohio State last week. So why is Michigan State just 5-point favorites? Kind of looks a little grimy here. Rutgers plus 5. Maybe a little money line action if you wanted to start cooking up a round robin underdog money line parlay for college. Rutgers would certainly be something that could be included. Going to pick up the pace here, I promise. South Carolina at Tennessee. Tennessee, our easiest win, or our co-easiest win last week. Does that mean that we've overreacted by making them 10.5-point favorites to South Carolina? It does not. South Carolina stinks. They have been in competitive games with mediocre teams, and now they get Tennessee, who is going to bomb them, is going to run on them, is going to do all of the above. I'm going to lay 10.5 points, which you're probably sitting there going you never do that. I'm going to do it this week. If they don't cover, maybe never again, or at least not for a few more weeks. Short favorite that I'm going to be on, Louisville. Feels a little shorter than it should, and that scares me a little bit, but -2.5 at home to a Virginia team that could not stop a nosebleed. Not that those are necessarily easy to stop. Give me Louisville and the Cardinals here. Cunningham, not necessarily a Heisman candidate, but certainly one of the more fun players to watch in the country. I think they win that game comfortably. Boise and BYU, another favorite. What is going on here? Give me BYU. We faded Boise with Nevada, another money line play last week. That worked out incredibly well. Do not believe in this Boise team. Now they go on the road to a BYU team who, by the way, sneaky undefeated team. Is there a path for them to get to the college football playoff? No, I don't think so, but they could be included in the dozen teams that we talked about earlier on this week. Let's go into some MACtion. This is how we get to 23 games right here, by including the MAC. Central Michigan and Ohio. Central Michigan has 2 wins, Robert Morris and FIU. Now, Robert Morris, I don't even think is a real football team. FIU certainly doesn't seem like one either. They get a ton of credit for hanging with Missouri early on this season, but they are now 5-point favorites on the road at Ohio. Ohio, listen, they're not very good either. I don't think either of these teams are any good, so I'm going to take the home underdog plus 5 points. Speaking of home underdogs, Syracuse, Wake Forest, bucking their head all of a sudden as a team that could win the ACC. Oddly enough, the Dome is where those hopes go to die a lot of the times. And Syracuse is a scrappy group, right? They lost by 3 to Florida State. That's kind of a bummer because who loses to Florida State anymore? But now you get 6 points with Syracuse, a team who beat Liberty, a very good team at home a few weeks ago in a very similar spot here. I'm on the Syracuse Orangemen in this one. SMU, love this team. They're by far the biggest challenger to Cincinnati the rest of the way here on the regular season schedule. They play Navy. They're on the road to Navy. They are favored by 13.5 points. Normally not a place where I sort of want to get involved in with road teams. SMU's offense is going to throw it all over Navy. They're going to score 40 to 50 points here. Navy cannot keep up with SMU. Give me SMU minus 13.5. Wisconsin and Illinois. Brett Bielema against his former team. It's disgusting. I don't feel great about it. Plus 11, though, with Illinois at home in just, it would probably be like first 1 to 20 wins type of a game. Absolutely hideous game. Don't watch it. Just take the points and move on. Florida Atlantic, another big winner for us last week. I'm going to take them plus 4 against UAB. Florida Atlantic not getting the credit I think they deserve. We love backing UAB a lot of the times here, but we're getting 4 for the Florida Atlantic Owls. North Texas at Missouri. Again, Missouri, the victims to Tennessee last week. And again, one of our 2 easiest wins of our lives. Now they get to just beat the pulp out of North Texas, and I think they take advantage of that opportunity, knowing that the rest of their SEC schedule is coming and wins will be hard to come by in the future. This is a get-right spot. I think they win this thing by 4 touchdowns. Minus 19 is the number. So if they do by 3 touchdowns, we'll be fine with that. Oregon State goes to Pullman, Washington. Oregon State's good. Did you know that? I didn't even think I knew that, right? Like, they beat Washington last week. Not that we think that highly of Washington. They're getting a little excited about everything that's going on over there, but now they go to the Palouse, and the Washington State Cougars probably going to be rainy and scummy, and maybe that's actually to Oregon State's advantage. But Jaden DeLora and the Washington State Cougars were really impressive in shutting down Cal and scoring enough to comfortably win that game as 7.5-point underdogs last week at Berkeley. Now they come home. It's just an absolute death trap for favorites that maybe we're not all that sure of. So give me Washington State plus the 4 there. Georgia Southern, quickly go ahead and Google shotgun beer on top of team bus. And then you get the story of the Georgia Southern Eagles this year. But that's off the field stuff. Didn't seem to bother them last week when they absolutely trucked Arkansas State. I think they're live to win this game on the road at Troy, who, again, I was focused in on way too much last week. I do not think much of this Troy team. So Georgia Southern plus 5.5, maybe a little money line shot there. TCU lost to Texas last week, but that was a fight. Give me them on the road. It's a bit of an uncomfortable situation, but is what it is. Short favorites, minus 2.5 at Texas Tech. UTSA and Western Kentucky play each other. It's like my children playing each other. And I don't even have children, so like it is my children playing each other. I'm just going to take the points here. UTSA plus 3.5 on the road at Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky just had those 2 games against Big Ten teams. They're beat up, man. They're beat up. So, like, it's great that they get to go home, but UTSA is the much fresher team with wins on the road at Illinois and on the road at Memphis. So the road is not necessarily, overwhelming to them. So we're getting 3.5 points there. I'm taking the Roadrunners. Wyoming at Air Force. Air Force minus 5 is the play there. I don't think as highly of Wyoming as I think many do. And Air Force playing really good football on both sides of the ball. Gonna grit my teeth here and give LSU one last chance. LSU plus 3 on the road to Kentucky. Kentucky with that big win at home against the Gators last week. Can they do it again against top flight SEC opponents? Ed Orgeron all of a sudden has a hot seat going. Like how quickly we forget, right? Yeah. But LSU getting plus 3 points here. I'm going to take that. The one I think I like the most, or the 2 that I think I like the most here coming down the pipe, Michigan's going to Nebraska, right? And you think Nebraska, like it's a horror show, like they're 3-3, like they lost to Illinois in that first game. They've covered 5 straight games, right? We won with them last week, laying a bunch of points against Northwestern. I think they stun the Wolverines here this week. Night game in Lincoln. I think that's an upset. Listen, it's only a 3-point spread here, but the money line certainly viable there as well. And Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. This game, Notre Dame was a minus 1 point favorite. So in my underdog column this week, I included Virginia Tech because they were plus 1. I think this line flips. It's flipped kind of back and forth already, but Virginia Tech minus 1, anything in that pick'em range here. Virginia Tech just had a bye week and now they get Notre Dame. They've been plotting for this team, for 2 weeks now, whereas Notre Dame just got beat by Cincinnati. And now this is starting to unravel a bit for Notre Dame. So give me Virginia Tech at home there. And the last 2, Utah at USC, some night game action. USC minus 3, sneaky playing a little better lately. I think that just the wheels have fallen off here necessarily for Utah. And then Memphis plus 3.5 at Tulsa. Tulsa's got 1 win, and that was against Arkansas State. If anybody watched 5 seconds of that game last night where we laid 19 points with Coastal Carolina at Arkansas State, that's not that impressive of a victory, right? Yeah. And so now they're favored against Memphis by 3.5 points. We're getting the hook. Give me Memphis plus 3.5, and that is your hurry-up offense.
Wow. As always, the hurry-up offense never disappoints. I have no idea how you do what you do, but I'm glad that you do what you do, because we appreciate you coming through and blessing us each and every week with your picks, especially as a hurry up offense. We try to stay hot with that. But Matt, the people want to find you. Where can they find you on social media, my dude?
Yeah, man, at MRUS Authentic on Twitter here, right, man? So like we go and we talk about point spread stuff here, right? And we allude to money lines and teasers and all of that stuff. Anything that I write about money line parlays and teasers and ratings and all of that stuff, you can find over at MRUS Authentic that I do for the score. And so, yeah, just follow me on Twitter at MRUS Authentic. So whether it's this podcast and doing our best bets and that sort of thing, or all of that sort of auxiliary stuff that we talk about, it's all right there, man, at MRUS Authentic on Twitter.
Thanks a lot, man, for coming through. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks to Matt for coming on the pod. And if you want to follow me online, you can do so on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander and on Twitter at Shell Alexander. But for more from this brand new project for DRF Sports, you got to go to drf.com/sports. If you're not familiar with the letters DRF, the Daily Racing Form has been around for over 100 years, giving you all of the horse racing information, data, and analysis. But now they're taking over the sports world. So if you want coverage on every football game and also everything else you need to know from the NBA, MLB, and more, head to drf.com/sports for all of the details, insights, and betting information. The site has data on every game, including offensive and defensive stats, betting angles, line movements, key injuries, head-to-head records, and team stats. The DRF data is what powers our power trends. If you want to see which trends our analysts have selected, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. And if you want access to all the raw data, go to drf.com/sports. That's where you get the usual previews. Plus, we go into the games in depth on this podcast twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. Basically, however you want all of your betting information, we've got you covered. My name again is Sheldon Alexander. Thanks for joining us here on the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 10. That's all we got for now. But until next time, see ya.
Thanks for listening to the DRF Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. For more sports betting advice, go to drf.com/sports and follow on Twitter at DRF_sports.